Welcome to the Voice of Islam. The Voice of Islam is a weekly radio program organized by the Islamic Council of Jamaica, the umbrella organization for the Muslim community in Jamaica, to propagate the message of Islam, dispel the common misconceptions about Islam, and facilitate a medium to provide Islamic perspective on topical issues and alternative solutions. You may contact the Islamic Council of Jamaica at 648-9545. That's 648-9545. You are listening to the Voice of Islam. Before we begin, let's take a few minutes to listen to the recitation of verses selected from the final revelation to mankind, Al-Quran.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. واذكر في الكتاب مريم إذ انتبذت من أهلها مكانا شرقيا فاتخذت من دونهم حجابا فأرسلنا إليها روحنا فتمثل لها بشرا سويا قالت إني أعوذ بالرحمن منك إن كنت تقيا قال إنما أنا رسول ربك لأهب لك غلاما زكيا. And mention, O Muhammad, in the book the story of Mary when she withdrew from her family to a place towards the east. And she took in seclusion from them a screen. Then we sent to her our angel, and he represented himself to her as a well-proportioned man. She said, Indeed, I seek protection in the most merciful from you, so leave me if you should be fearing of Allah. He said, I am only the messenger of your Lord to give you news of a pure boy. She said, How can I have a boy while no one has touched me and I have not been unchaste? He said, Thus it will be. Your Lord says, It is easy for me, and we will make him a sign to the people and a mercy from us, and it is a matter already decreed. So she conceived him, and she withdrew with him to a remote place.
You are listening to the Voice of Islam.
In Africa, the language of higher education was Arabic. It's true. It really is true, audience. And when you think of Swahili or Hausa, 60 or 70% of Swahili is Arabic, because Arabic is it's a universal, it's universal in its nature. Just go to Arabic classes for a month or two and you'll believe. Okay? Arabic is not necessarily in its design, when you look at it, for the Arabian Peninsula only. It has a type of elasticity to it that encompasses other language groups. So the word Swahili comes from the word Sahel, which means coasts. So the coastal languages, or the coastal expressions, east and west, you have now Swahili. Okay? So the language of higher education was Arabic. The Quran was the principal text to be studied, the one which all others derived. It contained the sum of all that existed, past, present, future, the whole universe. Also, Sheikh Anta Diop made a refutation to the falsehood presented in Chancellor Williams's book, The Destruction of a Black Civilization, and Joseph Ben Jochannan, who those men, they do not use primary source to teach. Slave mongering and invading. And this is not a defense now of any Arabs who are involved. We're just saying Islam as a way of life has nothing to do with slave trading and slave mongering. On page 101, Sheikh Anta Diop, who died in 1986, said this: Much has been made of Arab invasions of Africa. They occurred in the north, but in black Africa, they are figments of the imagination. And in the north, when that began around December of 639, it was when Abdullah ibn Amr one of the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, he was the Emir of Egypt during the rulership or the Khilafah, the Caliphate of Umar ibn al-Khattab. And the Persians and the Romans attacked the Muslims. He sent a letter to Umar, and Umar responded and said, you have to defend. So, of course, there was a skirmish. Of course, there was a war, but not for people to convert. No way. Because the Quran says in chapter 2, verse 256, La ikraha fi din, qad tabayyana rushdi min al-ghayy. Let there be no compulsion. That means no compulsion in someone accepting the religion, to practice the religion, because the truth is made clearly from error. It's a choice. It's a clear choice. And when you look at it very carefully, if someone holds a gun to my head or holds a knife to my throat and say, repeat after me, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, which can be translated, I testify that there is nothing that has the right to be worshipped except Allah, and I testify that the Prophet Muhammad is the last messenger of Allah. Did I really become a Muslim by force? It can't work, because I have to know how to fast. I have to know what time I should do the morning prayer known as Fajr. I should know what time to do the afternoon prayer, the late afternoon prayer, the sunset prayer. Okay? I should know the details of the rites of pilgrimage, Umrah or Hajj in Mecca. I have to know how to fast during the Ramadan, during the month of Ramadan. That takes details. How am I going to know it's 2.5% of my savings after my expenses that I should give to the poor and the needy for the wealth redistribution system? How am I going to know, and how am I going to calculate it? Especially with my family members. How will I know how to give zakat al-fitr at the end of Ramadan to purify my fast? So no one can be a Muslim by force. It takes details, because to be a Muslim, it means you're practicing. You can call yourself Muslim, but it doesn't mean you are Muslim. And it doesn't mean that a person who is a weak practitioner is not a Muslim. It doesn't mean that. It means that you cannot be forced to become a Muslim.
You are listening to the Voice of Islam.
So in further quotation of Sheikh Anta Diop, during the period of our study from the 3rd to the 17th centuries, not one conquest was ever launched by way of the Nile River. So where are these stories coming from about invasions in Egypt? Nor was there ever any conquest by the Muslims or the Arabs of Mozambique or any other East African territory. None whatsoever. Even the conservative Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, who is buried in Ghana, I think he died in 1963 and he's buried in Ghana. He said, in this whole story of the so-called Arab slave trade, the truth has been strangely twisted. He also said a secondary result of the British and American slavery and slave trade, and specifically was based on American demand for ivory. Because history informs us that the only real role that a few of the Arabs played in our enslavement came a long time after the Spanish. Of course, the Portuguese were before the Spanish, then the Dutch and the French and the British, and then of course the Americans, who encompass all those nationalities and ethnic groups, had massively dominated Africa for several centuries. This involvement by only a small clique of Arabs had its true beginning and ending in the 19th century, and even then it was but a secondary result of the British and American slavery and slave trade, and specifically was based on American demand for ivory. Where can you find this? The World and Africa, page 68, by Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. He even said about the Muslim African that Geo Timbuktu, and Jenne were intellectual centers, and at the University of Sankore gathered thousands of students of law, literature, grammar, geography, and surgery. A literature began to develop in the 16th and 17th century. The university was in correspondence with the best institutions on the Mediterranean coast. Black universities sent black scholars to learn and lecture to the Mediterranean world. Black historians like Abdurrahman as-Sa'di wrote the Bible of the Sudan, or Tariq al-Sudan, and Tariq al-Fatah. From this Africa, a new cultural impulse entered Europe, because Europe didn't really have any thriving universities of such at that time, and became the Renaissance. Where is this? Page 211 and page 223 of W.E.B. Du Bois' book. He's not a Muslim, and he wrote this because he went to the sources. He went to the sources. So did Basil Davidson, a non-Muslim. So did many other scholars of repute. Go to the sources, and the truth will, as we say from time to time, set us free. Assalamu alaikum.
You are listening to the Voice of Islam.
Let's continue. So, thus again, it confirms that the spirit is a tangible, physical being, a prophet. Yes, a prophet. Because in John 16, it further says, it will guide ye into all truth and teach things that they could not bear at that time. No, so it's clear then, it confirms that this other comforter, this spirit, is a tangible physical being, a prophet. Now, this prophet has been clearly described throughout the Bible. And as I said, I'm going to mention the verses and some keywords. I want you to research. So if you don't have your book, you don't have your pencil and your paper, you may not have read these verses. You may not have been checking. Don't ask me. You go to anyone, go to your pastor, go to whoever, but these verses are explicitly clear in the meaning. So unless someone decides to change it, then that's up to them. But here are the verses that we're going to look at quickly before we conclude today's program. I know it's a heavy topic. And at the end, I'll mention the verses again. So just in case you don't have your pen and your paper, get them quickly. I'll just give you a few seconds. Get something to write it down. Pick up your phone. Type down these verses quickly. Put them down. And let's see how we can really get to the truth. So now, the description about this prophet in the Bible. Isaiah 21 verses 7 to 17. It speaks about a rider upon camels who fled from swords, and is from the descendants of Kedar. Isaiah 21 verses 7 to 17. Yes, Isaiah 21 verses 7 to 17, it speaks about, the rider upon the donkey, who is Christ himself, and the rider upon camels who fled from the swords, from the descendants of Kedar. And I'm not going to mention the name of this comforter because I want you to do your own research. In Ezekiel 27, verse 21, it speaks about the descendants of Kedar and where they are in Arabia. Yes, Ezekiel 27, verse 21, descendants of Kedar in Arabia. Also, Deuteronomy 18:18. Yes, Deuteronomy 18:18. Raising up a prophet from amongst their brethren, like unto thee. The brother of the Israelites are the Ishmaelites. Yes. The brothers of the Israelites are the Ishmaelites. That's Deuteronomy 18:18. Yes, I know some of these verses, and you have heard different interpretations, but think about it. Very straightforward. From amongst their brothers, the brothers of the Israelites are the Ishmaelites. Israelites, Isaac, the brother of Isaac was Ishmael. Clear. Genesis 25, verse 13. Kedar is actually a son of Ishmael. Peace be upon him. Yes. Genesis 25, verse 13. Kedar is a son of Ishmael. John 1, verses 20 to 21. The question was asked, art thou that prophet? And Christ said, no, he isn't. Imagine. Art thou that prophet? So there was a prophet expected after Christ. John 1, verse 20 to 21. Isaiah 28, verse 10 to 11. Yes, Isaiah 28, verse 10 to 11. It spoke about revelation in another tongue. That is not a Jewish tongue, because it's another tongue. So Isaiah 28, verses 10 to 11 speaks about revelation in another tongue. Clearly, it wouldn't be a Jewish tongue. So what other language? Isaiah 29, verse 12. Yes, it says a book that is delivered to an illiterate man, a man who can't read. Yes, Isaiah 29, verse 12. A book delivered to an illiterate man. Who is that man? John 1, verse 25. A prophet expected after Christ and Elias, peace be upon them. Yes, John 1, verse 25 speaks about a prophet that was expected after Christ and Elias, peace be upon them. And also, Isaiah 42, verses 10 to 11. Isaiah 42, verses 10 to 11. A new song to be sung to the Lord from the descendants of Kedar. Yes, those descendants of Kedar, the descendants of Ishmael who were based in Arabia. Yes, Isaiah 42, verses 10 to 11. A new song to be sung to the Lord. What is this song? Is there a revelation that when they read it, it sounds like they're singing? So in conclusion, before I conclude, I'll repeat the verses very quickly. The verses we mentioned today: Matthew 5, verses 17 to 18. Matthew 5, verses 17 to 18. John 16, verse 7. John 16, verse 7. Luke 1, verses 15, 41, and 67. Luke 1, verses 15, 41, and 67. Luke 2, verse 26. Luke 3, verse 22. John 14, verse 16. 1 John 4, verses 1 to 2. 1 John 4, verses 1 to 2. We also mention some other verses, but all of these verses mentioned, you can always contact us. At the end of the program, you will hear the contact information. Take that contact information and contact us if you need more references. So in concluding this program, I challenge thee. Do you sincerely believe in the teachings of Christ? Was his mission to no avail? Do you now believe in the Comforter, a descendant of Kedar? Do you know this man? Seek the truth, and the truth shall set you free.
You are listening to the Voice of Islam.
Referencing your book, Beyond Belial, when it comes to other Islamic, I guess you can say other Afro-Islamic, if you will, figureheads later down, can you tell us some other African Islamic, from Mansa Musa and some other?
Yeah. So what's interesting with Beyond Bilal is that, as you mentioned, a lot of people just use Bilal as the scapegoat or the one black friend.
Yeah.
And for Islam, when you study that books of tafsir and hadith and Quran and all of these things in depth, you realize that there's so much more black history and black contribution in Islam that we don't talk about. So for example, and the book is divided into 4 or 5 chapters. The first chapter are called Black History in the Quran. Because speaking of Ethiopia, there's a prophet from Ethiopia, or a saint from Ethiopia, who was called Luqman.
Okay.
And he has a chapter in the Quran named after him.
Okay.
Surah Luqman, Surah 31. And he was Ethiopian, and he was a black man.
I did not know that.
And he has a whole chapter in the Quran named after him, speaking about his wisdom and the wisdom that he passed on to his son. Not only that, but when we study some of the books, and I bring all of the proof and the references in the book,
yes,
Adam was a black man according to Islamic tradition, the first man. And the word Adam itself means black.
Okay.
In classical Arabic. If you describe someone as having an Adam alone, Adam's skin tone is dark brown or black. And that's the same skin tone used to refer, the Prophet ﷺ used to refer to the skin color of Moses.
Yes.
So in the Islamic tradition, Moses is also black. And that's the same skin tone Prophet Muhammad ﷺ used to describe Jesus as well.
Okay.
So with us, especially conscious people or Rasta people or anyone, they'll look in the Bible and they say, Jesus must have been black. If you look in Revelations, his foot,
foot of brass and all that, woolly hair.
And the woolly hair. But the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came and said it clearly, that he saw a vision of Jesus and he was black, Adam. And then he said the same thing with Moses. When he saw a vision of Moses, he said he was black, he was Adam.
And so within the Islamic tradition, the most important figures in the Christian tradition being Jesus and in the Judaic tradition being Moses,
right,
were all described as being black.
Yes, very
by our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I talk about that in the first chapter of the book. If we, it will be too long of an interview for me to name all of them.
No problem.
But some of the most closest people to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam were black people. The woman that raised him, as I mentioned, one of his closest companions, and all of these people, even some of his relatives, his cousins, Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib was described as being Adam, same color, same word, same skin color.
Okay.
And so I discuss all of that in the book. And then I go on to Islam in Africa, and I speak about the West African empires. And that's something that a lot of people don't really realize, is that the most powerful West African empires that existed before colonization were Muslim empires.
Oh, yes, that's true.
The Ghana Empire, and the Mali Empire, and the Songhai Empire, and the Sokoto Empire. All of these were Muslim, black West African Muslims. And they were black West African Muslims who did not convert to Islam through being conquered by Arabs or being forced, but they had a respectful trade agreement with the Arabs in the north, North Africa, the Egyptians and the Moroccans and the Algerians and the Tunisians. And when they would come into West Africa, the West Africans were curious about their religion. They studied it. They decided to convert. It was the kings and the rich people and the noble people who first started converting to Islam. And then after that, the normal people followed.
The leaders of society first, and then everyone else came along. Okay.
And then scholarship developed amongst the West Africans, where you had certain families who devoted themselves to studying and teaching the Quran. Their families like the Cisse family, or the Toure family, or the Gassama family, or the Drame family. All of these families, and they were the ones in West Africa that spread Islam across West Africa, because they'll move into a village, they'll start teaching people's children, they'll start healing, they'll start trading.
Yes.
And all of that I discuss in the book. And so Islam in West Africa, we see it spread differently from how it spreads in a lot of the Arab world. Where in a lot of the Arab world, they were conquered by Muslims, by either the Khilafah, the Abbasids, or the Umayyads, and then, or the Ottomans, and then they had to become Muslim in order to adapt to the new government.
Right, like the Balkans and all those countries.
Exactly. But within West Africa, we saw that it was scholars and traders and healers who were traveling across West Africa converting people. So it was a very natural conversion, and it wasn't forced. And the only time we even really see holy war or jihad in West Africa, it comes when the colonialization arrives, and the West Africans are fighting off the tribes that are working with the French and the British to enslave them and send them to the New World.
Right,
That's
like
when they start to see Muslims. Yeah, it becomes reactionary. But for 1,000 years, Islam existed in West Africa and became the majority religion in West Africa. And it was spread through peaceful means, through education, through healing, through community support. So that's very important to know. And then it links in with us and our legacy over here, because for many of the people that were enslaved and brought to the Caribbean or brought to North America or brought to South America, they were Muslims. People give the estimates as 10 to 15%. But if you look at West Africa is 60 to 70% Muslim. So the numbers must have increased, or it must be way more than that.
Yes, that might be a lowball estimate.
It's a very lowball estimate, and considering the fact that the slave traders did not have any concern for the culture or the nationality of these people, and they were forcing them to convert when they arrived. So if we look at, for example, Alex Haley Roots, Kunta Kinte was Muslim.
Yes, in the show, right?
Yeah, and I have a video on YouTube that talks about his lineage and the family that he comes from. But in the slave records, his name was Toby Walla. He was a Christian, and he married another Christian, but he was Muslim. He practiced Islam his whole life until he passed away. So many thousands of Muslims were registered as Christians with their new Christian names.
Yes.
They were forcefully baptized on the plantation.
Right.
They were made to go to church. Some of them even fake conversion outwardly so that they wouldn't be suspected.
and probably punished and all of these
and
things.
punished
Yes.
and all of that. And we have cases of that here in Jamaica, which I guess we'll come to later on in the interview. So a very vast majority, or a large percentage of the West Africans taken to the Caribbean and to North America and to South America were Muslims. And I would say way over 50%.
Thank you all for listening to The Voice of Islam, a weekly radio program organized by the Islamic Council of Jamaica to propagate the message of Islam, dispel the common misconceptions about Islam, and facilitate a medium to provide Islamic perspective on topical issues and alternative solutions. Remember, you may collect a free Quran, yes, a free Quran, by emailing us, sending a text message, or visiting any of our locations. Please send in your questions and comments to islamradiojm@gmail.com. That's islamradiojm@gmail.com, or by text message to 892-1350. That's 892-1350. You may also visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/Islamic Council of Jamaica, or find us on Instagram at ICOJ_official, or you may listen to a past episode on our YouTube channel, Islamic Council of Jamaica. You may also visit any of the following locations: Islamic Council of Jamaica, 24 Camp Road, Kingston 4. Masjidul Aziz, Portmore Central Plaza, West Tradeway, Portmore. Masjidul Rahman, Windsor Road, Spanish Town. Islamic Dawah Center, 1 McCarthy Street, Montego Bay. Masjidul Hakim, 138 Main Street, Ocho Rios. Masjid As-Sabr, Albany, St. Mary. Masjid Hussein, 3 Miles River, Westmoreland. Masjidul Haq, New Green Road, Mandeville. Masjid An-Nur, Port Maria, St. Mary. Masjidul Ihsan, West End Road, Negril. Masjid Al-Taqwa, Newell, St. Elizabeth. Masjid Ibrahim, Riversdale, St. Catherine. Masjid As-Sakina, 26 Miriam Way, Montego Bay. Peace be upon you all. Assalamu alaikum.